Starring the British biffer Scott Adkins, we are talking Prisoner of War. And this is directed by Lewis Mandylor, a frequent collaborator with Scott Adkins. Adkins actually also co-wrote this movie. And this is a relatively low-budget World War II actioner. Scott Adkins stars as James Wright, a British RAF pilot who is downed in the Japanese-occupied Philippines. And he is captured by Japanese soldiers and sent to a POW camp. There he meets a group of other POWs, mainly American and I think Filipino, and hatches a kind of a plan to try and either escape or get help. However, the commander of this camp takes some interest in James Wright, as he appears to know a forbidden martial arts technique, and this kind of Japanese commander is intrigued how the Scott Adkins character knows martial arts. Bear in mind this is taking place in 1942, and puts Scott Adkins' character through a variety of trials. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So let us discuss. Now, as I say, Scott Adkins and Lewis Mandylor have made a whole host of martial art movies together. This one, for the most part, I would say plays more like a martial art movie rather than a World War II style war film. You know, it's set at the backdrop of a kind of POW camp in World War II, but it is mainly focusing on combat within that. So if you are wanting to watch a kind of war film, it's less of that. But what can I say that works in this movie's favour? Now, this isn't going to be a massively high budgeted movie, but I've got to say I was still quite impressed with the production value here. There are some issues, and I think this is really down to the budgetary issues, but we will talk about that. But if you can accept you are watching a lower budget movie, I still thought this movie was actually pretty well kind of put together. We do get a few kind of aerial scenes involving kind of planes and stuff, and I think they're all done pretty well. The location shooting, you know, looks pretty good, and there's kind of a large amount of extras here, giving it an authentic kind of feel that there is a mass of people here, both in guards and prisoners. So you do feel like, you know, it's not just a handful of prisoners. There is a genuine kind of like prison kind of population here. That was all sort of pretty good. You know, I thought that was an interesting kind of side of here, that it's clearly a lower budget film, but it still manages to have a decent, I would say, production value. I actually kind of quite like some of the characters here. I mean, Scott Adkins is a pretty watchable kind of action lead, and his acting ability has, I would say, increased over the years. And, you know, he makes for a likeable kind of lead protagonist here. This kind of one British character in, you know, mostly otherwise a kind of an American and sort of Japanese cast here. But I quite like that camaraderie with the other Allied soldiers. Even, you know, they're from different countries, but they still have that sort of camaraderie because obviously they're all kind of allies and stuff like that. So that I quite liked. I found our Japanese commander quite an interesting sort of character. I couldn't quite tell if his interest in the Scott Adkins character was like either respect or if he was just kind of intrigued by the fact that you know, the Scott Adkins character knows martial arts and knows this kind of forbidden technique and is really just kind of perplexed by it and wants to kind of test him, or whether it was some genuine sort of level of respect. But I thought that was kind of played pretty well, and their sort of antagonistic relationship, I think, is really the heart of the film. And I thought these two men who really, obviously, either side, and Scott Adkins becomes the kind of the figurehead for the kind of the POWs, makes for an interesting kind of battle of wills. And that's, you know, a lot of what this movie is this kind of like almost chess between these two men and their respective sides about who is kind of has the sort of the respect of their men, or who is really in control and that sort of thing. There are some many logic issues with it, because ultimately you could arguably say the Japanese commander really was playing with fire by letting Scott Adkins' character really have a level of control, but you know, it is what it is, it's a movie. The fight scenes are plentiful and well executed, and you know, they're very well filmed and choreographed. I guess Scott Adkins, seasoned professional now at martial arts kind of fights on screen, obviously primarily known for the Undisputed films, but all the action sequences are thrilling to look at, lots of kind of impressive kind of martial arts, and you do feel like a genuine sort of sense of kind of impact within that. We get a little bit of kind of gunplay, and as I say, there's a couple of scenes involving planes and stuff as well, but for the most part it is a kind of a martial arts film, and that part of it is done pretty well. So, you know, I'd say if you don't mind a slightly lower budget movie that's maybe not too concerned with being particularly accurate in regards to history, but it's still an enjoyable film if you just want to kind of watch a little bit more of a visceral action film. Let's talk about what doesn't work. I think the budget is probably working against this movie to some degree. It is quite an ambitious movie to have on a probably somewhat modest budget. There are some things here, like the size of the camp seems a little bit small. The security here seems, you know, laughably lax, to be honest with you. Japanese prison camps weren't known for particularly sort of easy life on the prisoners. All the prisoners here look relatively healthy, it must be said. There's even a couple of ones who are arguably a little overweight, but you know, maybe it's a little bit unrealistic when you consider they're meant to have been there for a long period of time. Some of the attention to detail here is again a little bit hit and miss. For example, I mean, there's small things like Scott Adkins' characters, his hair's always in kind of like perfect shape. Look, he looks like he's putting the mousse on every morning. No one ever seems to kind of grow like facial hair. They all seem to have just a either clean shaven or, you know, 5 o'clock shadow, apart from like one guy who already had a beard. But we're meant to believe these people are POWs, but they seem to be quite well groomed and things like this. Some of the kind of like the costuming looks like it sort of changes. Scott Adkins' kind of like one uniform, one t-shirt that he's wearing looks like it's clearly multiple different t-shirts over the kind of the course of the film. So there's kind of some little attention to detail things here. We've got like one of the American characters got like full sleeve tattoo and things like that. And that really wouldn't have been a thing in 1942. You know, you might have had some army tattoos, but it wouldn't be like that sort of style of tattoo at that kind of point in history and things like this. So, you know, arguably you could say it definitely has that sort of B-movie, not quite authentic looking type of things. As for the kind of the more story elements here, you could arguably say that, like I say, the commander here, although they're trying to have this battle of wills and this kind of mutual respect, you know, as a commander of a POW camp, if you're looking at it from the Japanese perspective, the guy makes some poor decisions, you know, from that point of view, and really allows himself to, I think, get into a problem with the POWs. And I think if you have to be honest, if you were a commander in this situation, you'd probably rule with a little bit of a tighter fist. Also, I mean, again, like I say, the Japanese POW camps, there's no real, like, people aren't getting tortured like they were, you know, back in kind of real life camps. There's no like bamboo or water torture and stuff like that. It's just kind of like sort of not in it at all. And maybe it didn't happen in every camp, or maybe not all the time, but again, it's such a kind of like a thing that they are known for. It's surprising here that it's not ever really included. There's one scene where Scott Adkins' character gets kind of beaten with canes, but that's kind of it. But the other sort of soldiers really don't seem to have any type of you know, too much hassle really themselves. I thought the kind of the flirtation with one of the nurses seems a little bit unnecessary to me. This doesn't go into a full-on romance, but you know, I'm thinking, oh god, do we really need this? We've got to have a couple of female characters, I suppose, but you know, again, it's sort of, come on. And then the only other thing I would say really is that I think you know, Scott Adkins is a clearly talented martial artist, and the whole point of this movie, he's this great martial artist that is kind of flummoxing the Japanese because they're sort of, well, he's beating the Japanese at their own game. But I have to say, I would have thought it would have benefited the movie to have Scott Adkins struggle a little bit more. Whenever he is in one of these kind of matches, he more or less kind of cuts through him like a hot knife through butter. Never really kind of seemingly ever really looks like he's going to lose at any point. It just seems to be a little bit too easy. And bear in mind, this is a prisoner that's going to be malnourished, sleep deprived, probably tortured, beaten, things like this. But he's able to kind of easily overcome multiple opponents and things like this. I think it would have behooved the movie to make Scott Adkins' character have to struggle a little bit more than he actually does, because he just seems to easily kind of beat these kind of Japanese soldiers with a little bit too much ease. I understand that's obviously the point of the story, because it's meant to be this kind of, who is this guy? How did he know our tricks and things like that? And you know, but again, I think it kind of it deflates the tension just a little bit, I would say. However, now overall, if you're not too worried about historical accuracy or things like this, or genuine sort of a realistic depiction of a war film, it's still a fun movie. It's a fun, adrenaline-filled actioner with a likeable kind of lead character, you know, well choreographed action sequences and a good pace. And I say that, generally speaking, the production design here was, you know, pretty good considering the budget here. I'll give it a 6 out of 10 and an above average movie, although it's, as I say, it has a few kind of like issues with it. Have you seen it? Please let me know your thoughts, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time.